the best time to act is now. You need to be more open in accepting technology in how you do your work. And by utilizing digital tools such as Monday and other platforms that we've mentioned earlier, it can make your work easier. And what we advocate to our partners is that they spark champions in their own organizations, in their communities, in their areas affected by disasters, or even before disasters even strike.
This is the Digital Humanitarian, where we explore how technology is transforming crisis response.
Disaster response is changing. Earthquakes, floods, wildfires, every week, somewhere in the world, a crisis unfolds. But outdated methods, paper logs, slow coordination, and manual tracking can't keep up. From the Philippines Emergency Response Command Centers to AI-driven disaster forecasting, we'll uncover how relevant tech solutions increase time to impact. Because technology is no longer just an aid, it's a necessity. All right. Hello, Miguel.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being here. We've been working together for many years. And I really want us to start with Typhoon Falcon. So maybe you can kind of walk us through what's happening now on the ground.
Thank you, Dana. Telling you about the story of Typhoon Falcon, which affected us back in 2023, around July to early August. It is named Canon internationally. So for our listeners that are not familiar with the Philippine naming system, but this typhoon didn't actually make landfall or didn't actually approach land when it affected the Philippines. However, while it was moving, it enhanced what we call the southwest monsoon, which brings a lot of rains for several days while the typhoon is over the Pacific. And with those rains came flooding, especially in Metro Manila. We had several floodings reported north of Metro Manila and actually affecting around 3 million people in the Philippines, and around 3 people have died in the process of the flooding in several areas. And that flooding actually shut down major roads in the Philippines, connecting Metro Manila to the northern parts of the Philippines. So we at the PDRF Emergency Operations Center and our private sector partners closely monitored and coordinated with the government and quickly mobilized after receiving several requests from the national and local governments and other partners on the ground. However, during the response, we faced 3 key challenges. The first challenge was, while we coordinate, with the government, we have those relationships already. Requests for assistance, such as logistics like trucks to move aid, water, food, non-food items, came in through various channels, several channels, instant messaging apps like Viber, WhatsApp, and other channels, emails, calls. So we were using several channels already that, while this worked to some extent, it made it hard to keep track of progress and requests from areas affected by disasters. So we had a hard time compiling everything, managing every request. It was easy to be overwhelmed. And that posed a big problem for us at the Operations Center on how to manage those requests. Second, we experienced and noticed a lot of duplication of aid, especially north of the Manila, which is the capital area of the Philippines, where some organizations went to the same areas, bringing the same aid at the same time, so at the same week. Though it helped in the short term, this led to duplication of aid and wasted resources that could have been directed to different areas that are more in need. And I guess lastly, the EOC system or the Emergency Operations Center system is based on the Incident Command System, which is a structured model already. And much of the coordination and procedures are still done manually or the old-fashioned way, paper-based forms. And for a small team such as PDRF, in most cases, we're just around 5 to 10 people during an activation. This takes up a lot of time, and that could have been spent on actual response. So those are some of the things that we experienced during the Falcon, that Monday ERT reached out to us and offered assistance on how they can help us with those challenges.
It sounds like puzzled at how to collect the data when you're actually using pen and paper from the field and how to do it at scale. And then finally, also, you're starting to see that there's a lot of duplication of efforts, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What do you do now to bring in the digital coordination to this now?
At the PDRF, we have our operation center. It's a command center. So it looks like your like CCTV room or like command center you see in movies, where it is manned by 5 to 10 people, depending on the scale of the response or even more. And those people have 3 main objectives during an emergency. First, we have coordinators. So we have a team that coordinates with the UN, with other NGOs. We have a team that coordinates with the government and the local governments and actually volunteers and other stakeholders in a disaster. Second, we also have a team that does information management and collecting the data, analyzing the data, creating reports, etc. And lastly, we have a team that does admin and logistics, including managing resources, managing how we provide resources from our headquarters or from the warehouses of our member companies, PDRF, which are composed of big businesses. And how can those resources be delivered to areas affected by disaster? So that's how it usually goes. So it's a structured system already.
It's basically a massive command center with screens all over the place, kind of broadcasting different information. Really, really amazing to see. How does it look like? How does PDRF response look like? The digital aspects of it. What coordination tools do you bring? How does that work?
So at the PDRF Operations Center, we have 3 main products. Like I said earlier, we provide reports to our member companies. We coordinate the requirements of a disaster response from our partners on the ground, companies on the ground, governments, local governments, national government agencies. With that data, we look at our assets or our standby resources, prepositioned assets, and mobilize them with our logistics companies that are part of PDRF. So that's what we do. We connect resources at the PDRF. And usually during an emergency, that is the system. It's already a well-oiled machine. However, that doesn't mean that it's efficient. It can be like a well-oiled, well-practiced machine, but it can be an inefficient process. And that is when we started using GIS. So we use GIS in providing information to the member companies of PDRF, to our network, to the UN, to the government. We use GIS to map out where aid is needed. However, a lot of our processes are not only centered around GIS. So we also need to track resources on the ground, track requests from the government, track requests from the private sector, and connect them to where they are needed. So it's like a conduit. We want it to serve as a conduit. But how can we do that effectively or efficiently if we're using paper-based forms? We can do it. I mean, you can do it easily, but it's not as efficient. It takes a lot of time. So that's how we, wanted to explore platforms. And luckily, we saw platforms such as Kobo Collect that are, open source, and then also Monday.com, which, have helped us solve problems and challenges that we have experienced for Falcon.
And I remember we sent a team over and we worked together with you. And tell us a little bit about how you use technology. And I think you mentioned, and we saw that you had the data collected from the ground and you had the resources that you knew were available. You were doing a lot of the matching, correct?
Yes. And we do a lot of the matching. So since we coordinate with the government already, they provide us what are their requirements. So usually that comes through email. So they send like an email, like a PDF letter, or they can send it like through Viber, instant messaging apps like WhatsApp. So a lot of it is actually informal. So it's not through formal channels. So handling a lot of the requests. So imagine there are several government agencies that are in need of resources and several local governments. So how can you manage all of that? The Operations Center, you already have those relationships in place with the government, with the actors on the ground, with responders, with the UN, with different NGOs. And what usually happens in an emergency, if they need resources from the private sector, that is when they reach out to PDRF. So for instance, if they need like trucks, they need food, water, different aid. So what usually goes is, if I'm a government agency or a local government, the city mayor or a city disaster management office, I send out a request to PDRF through an email or through like instant messaging platforms. And a lot of those requests, combined from several agencies can be chaotic. So that's when we work with Monday's team to be able to solve those problems. So we started by creating a form, which is based on a board. And that form has outlines on what the organization was requesting that resource, what kind of resource they requested, where they need it, what kind are the requirements or what are the specifics, different contexts as well, such as how to get there, what are the dependencies with other government agencies. So we put that all in a form, and that is connected to a board at monday.com. With that, we were able to create like a dashboard where we see what are the newest submissions or newest requests coming in from our partners on the ground and see how we can help them. So we can see if the resource has been, when it was created, if we can connect it to our list of resource items that we have maybe at our member companies, or we have maybe we have like a fund where we can provide that resource. We started connecting the dots. We started by creating that form, creating that board, creating that dashboard, and we distributed that, or we sent them out the form to our stakeholders, so that we have a more systemized approach on how we handle aid and requests for aid. The second problem was duplication. This is an ongoing problem in several emergencies. Although a lot can be solved by coordination, it's better if you see it on a map. And we have that platform. We already have a platform through ArcGIS. However, sometimes it's easier if we can make it in a lighter weight version where several partners can access it. And that's when we realized that the Monday platform has that functionality. So we started by, first, what do we need? At first, we started by 3W. So who, what, and where is aid given? So that's what we did. We created the form where it is also connected to a board, similar to our process earlier. And that form is sent out to our partners so that they send out to PDRF, they submit to PDRF what they are doing on the ground, so that we see how we can avoid duplication of efforts, duplication of assets, duplication of initiatives in several areas. That's what we do during an emergency. Part of our work is providing that 3W system is also scalable. So you can make it 4, we can make it 5Ws depending on your information needs. Since at PDRF, we work a lot with the private sector, and they want to see where their aid is going and how they can avoid duplication with other private sectors and foundations on the ground. We also started digitizing as simple as an incident action plan, which we usually do it manually. We print out a form, we fill it out manually, and then we track our progress using that paper. But then we realize we already have the technology in place. Why not, utilize like a board, a similar board where you can create your objectives on the ground, your actions or action plans. When we try to solve a problem on the ground, we think of ways on how we can make it easier for our partners to communicate that kind of resource or gap that they needed to solve. When we do our work now, we usually use forms, boards, we use dashboards. Instead of doing everything by paper, generating PDF files, generating an email, instead of doing that, we usually just do forms because it's easier for them to fill out the form. And that takes less time than filling out several sections of a template that we provide them to, that they can print out and provide us what kind of resources they need.
So Miguel, tell me, how much time do you think you saved, just in a number?
So we save approximately around 30 to 40% of,
Wow.
The time digitizing forms instead.
Amazing, Miguel. So you're saying you're using all these forms and using the tools to visualize the information, to save time about 30 or 40%, to be more efficient. But tell me, does it also change the way that you now make decisions?
Yes, it does. By having that platform already in place, we are able to collect data more efficiently, have them stored in a single system or single board or the dashboard. And with that dashboard, we can make decisions better. We can have a more data-backed decision making, information backed decision making, and that makes the aid that we provide more value adding to the communities that are affected by disasters.
I'm curious, because we've been there. We've been to your command center, and it's amazing. You have all the screens, you have all the GIS mapping, and you have the dashboards, and you have all the information of like real time what's happening in the field. Why do you think this is not the standard? I mean, you guys are pretty exceptional from working with so many organizations. You're pretty exceptional. Why do you think this is not the standard when we're looking at disaster response? Why are there not more organizations out there that are operating the way that PDRF operates?
Well, we are lucky at PDRF because we have the world's first business emergency operations center focused on disaster management and humanitarian response. I think based from several years that we've running this, it takes a lot of resources. It takes time to build your own command center. It takes resources in terms of funding and to hire employees with certain expertise, and a lot of investments in technology, in equipment. And many organizations want to stick to what they already know. A lot of them, lack technical expertise to adopt like digital tools among many options out there. Or they don't know what technologies to use. There's a lot of resource requirements, and I think that limits organizations on why they can adopt a similar system, such as PDRF.
Interesting. So you're saying it's resources. First of all, you have to have maybe employees, which can be potentially mitigated with volunteers. You need to potentially buy the actual hardware, and also you need to have the knowledge, like what technologies do I need to use? What software do I need to use? And when other organizations, I know you guys are part of the CBI and you work with other kind of networks around the world, disaster response networks. What do you think really surprises them when they see what you've done? Because you really mitigated a lot of these challenges with the digital command center that you've built. What do you think surprises them when they see it?
I guess they're surprised really of how mature the private sector network in the Philippines is. We already have, a network in place for more than a decade now. And with that experience, having a decades of, lead time, we were able to innovate ways on how we can do our work better from the challenges that we experience in the Philippines. And that is what led to the decision to create an operations center, because during Super Typhoon Haiyan, which is one of the worst typhoons to ever hit land, there were duplication of resources. There were lack or gaps in coordination. And that's when we realized that why not create our operations center to be able to manage a disaster better for the private sector. So that's what led us to have that decision to create our own operations center.
And what advice would you have? If you're now going to talk to our listeners, they're an NGO, they're an organization that really at the end of the day, like you, wants to help people on the ground with requests that they're getting. What advice would you give them in terms of the digital aspects of the response if they're trying to really go digital?
For a system such as the Emergency Operations Center, which takes a lot of resources, what we've realized over the pandemic is that we can utilize technology in terms of how we do our work better, more cost effectively, more efficiently. So what we advise to our partners and similar organizations out there that are working with the private sector or any nonprofit in general is that they can capitalize on technology. They can start with open source technology that are out there, such as maybe Kobo Collect. They can use QGIS for mapping. And they can also work with organizations such as Monday, which reach out to us during an emergency so that they can get access to tools that are easy to, adopt. Those are the things that we wanted to advocate to our partners, that look at the technologies available out there, see if they have a non-profit rate or they can be accessed for free, or if they cannot be accessed for free, see if there are alternatives out there that they can use to be able to manage disasters better.
And I agree. I think the fact that, more organizations need to know that. For example, you mentioned QGIS. It's a great platform that is completely free. Kobo Toolbox. If you're a disaster response organization, it's a free platform for offline data collection. It integrates with the Monday Emergency Response Team, free platform as well for disaster response organizations. And there are so many more out there. And you kind of mentioned it, and then we had a lot of conversations about it in the past. This is, I think, also part of the roles the private sector should really play in disaster response, right?
It's, I guess, uniqueness is that it craves for innovation. Because with innovation, you can, develop more products that can help more communities. So I guess that's the unique part of being a private sector-led organization, is that we're more, I guess, open to utilizing data, utilizing technology, unlike, more, I guess, old school organizations where they usually do it like what they do from previous years. They stick to what they know. We have that leverage of accessing information and technologies from the private sector, even startups that are out there, small and medium enterprises, because they have that innovation already in place. It's just a matter of accepting that can probably help you, or working with them, being open to working with private sector and other key actors in an emergency.
And it's interesting, you talk a lot about, in the emergency, please adopt these technologies, adopt that. But what we also see is that change management could be a challenge. And how do you guys come across that in terms of kind of setting up the tools ahead of time and preparedness work and all of those really important things?
What we advocate at PDRF, we're big on change management. It's one of the things that we apply in the organization and in how we do our work and how we advocate things to our network. And what we usually do is we have a team that can propose a certain idea, certain technology, certain tool, certain change in the process, and they become those champions for change in our organization. And what they do is they communicate with the leadership and get the buy-in. They communicate with their supervisors, their teams, and communicate across teams. And they communicate to our stakeholders so that, we can better understand how we can adopt new technologies or how we can change how we do our work. So those are the strengths of PDRFs, that we really accept change in terms of how we do things.
For the listeners now hearing us and tuning in, what would you recommend them to do? What action they can really take now to strengthen then their own response efforts through the digital tools that we've mentioned, and potentially through better change management, or you tell me?
I guess the best time to act is now. You need to be more open in accepting technology and how you do your work. And by utilizing digital tools such as Monday and other platforms that we've mentioned earlier, it can make your work easier. And what we advocate to our partners is that they spark champions in their own organizations, in their communities, in their areas affected by disasters, or even before disasters even strike. Listen on what they need. Listen on what are the challenges that they face in an emergency. And with those challenges, you can start thinking on, can technology solve this problem? And with that, you can start to work with organizations that provide that kind of, solutions, either by working with academia, you can work with the private sector, startups. That can make your life easier before an emergency event strikes, because in an emergency, everything will be chaotic. And with technology, we can make it less chaotic, and we can help more people by utilizing or capitalizing on AI, capitalizing on GIS and other technologies out there.
This is the time to do it now. And you're also saying, set up those communication channels already ahead of time. So you know who's there, who's operating, but also who you can collaborate with to bring more efficient aid.
Yes, because relationships really matter before, during, and after an emergency. Without those relationships, you can't really, have a more holistic response. You'll just be doing things on your own. So what we suggest is really working with organizations that are already doing technology or utilizing technology, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to, develop your own application. You can utilize existing applications that are already out there, either for free or pro bono or even for a fee, because it already exists. A lot of organizations are already using it.
Yeah. I agree. And I've seen so many organizations trying to build their own, to start from scratch, or just to get too many platforms out there. And I agree. I mean, kind of follow your footsteps. Start small, start basic, don't overload. Make sure you have, those flexible platforms, the easy platforms, the one that everyone can easily use, and also that you can scale them. 100% agree. Why did you decide to work in disaster response and in humanitarian aid?
I guess from previous experiences, I live in a place in the Philippines outside of Metro Manila where we were affected by the second worst volcanic eruptions in the history. It's Mount Pinatubo eruption, which is where some really famous movies in Hollywood are based on in terms of the volcanic eruption. So ever since I was a child, ever since I was a kid, I've been hearing stories of big disasters. And when I was in school, several years ago, you see Super Typhoon Haiyan, you see Super Typhoon Pablo, and different super typhoons that we experience in the Philippines. And, that sparks that, I guess, advocacy in me that maybe with what I am currently doing, I can help, people better, by using engineering, by using science where I was trained at. So that's how it started for me, is that experience of listening to the stories or being directly affected by disasters and seeing the news that, communities are being flooded or communities are buried in ashfall. So those are my experiences that led me to working in disaster response and preparedness.
So where do you think this is going? If I have to ask, what's next for digital relief?
Well, I guess technology is really ramping up really fast. And it's not a matter of if you need to apply technology and how you do our work, but it's a matter of when. And I guess when should be now already. You should be doing it already even before disaster strikes. And what we see in the future is that we'll see more AI in how we do planning. That is the trend that has been happening already, where we use AI to look at satellite imagery and damage assessments, and maybe creating analysis from those damages to forecast potential humanitarian need in areas affected by disasters. And everything that is done now in terms of the disaster response, donors are always looking at the data. If you don't have data, you cannot really, get a lot of funding and support from donors. So that's what we advocate to our partners, is that they utilize data, they utilize technology so that they can convey how they do their work better and how they can have accountability using technology, how they can be smarter with the resources. So everything is basically runs through technology. We also have Internet of Things where you can provide early warning and other technologies out there that already exist. So it's more of just accessing those technology, being open to accepting that change in your organization.
All right, that's fascinating. And I'm sure we'll see more of that in the future. Miguel, thank you very, very much for joining us and for being here today and for all your insights.
Thank you so much, Dana. And we're happy to support Monday and other organizations digitize how they do their work.
All right. Thank you very much, Miguel. Appreciate it.
Disasters are often unpredictable, but response efforts don't have to be. If you're a part of an aid organization, having the right digital tools can mean the difference between chaos and coordinated action. If you need practical tools for your organization's disaster management, visit mondayert.org. And if you enjoyed this, please share it with one colleague or friend who'd find it useful.